We are live, coming to
Yay!
you from the United States of America and the United Kingdom, and we're uniting across the pond.
We are. And we're doing it. We're doing it well. We're not doing Scientology this time.
No, Alex made such a cool song, and um, it'll. I don't think we can play it, can we, Alex? Because
No.
you're not the host. I'm the
But we'll play it
host.
next time.
And I'm not good at hosting yet, but hey, figuring it out. So, hi guys, welcome to both of our channels. Welcome to That's So Effed Up. I'm your host, Ashley Love Richards.
Hi. And I'm Apostate Alex. Anyone watching this on my channel, go and watch this on Ash's channel, which is new. Historically, the podcast and everything that we've done in the past has been before Ash had a channel. So this is the first time I think we're doing a live together, and you have your own channel. So anyone watching on my channel, go and check out Ash's channel, watch the same stream so that she gets to watch ours, subscribe to her, all that sort of stuff. There's a link in the description. But this is very much Ash's show, so I am at your mercy, and I have no idea what to expect.
Yeah, so I'm going to be explaining to you and to the people. By the way, good morning everybody, or gosh, probably good afternoon to most people. It's 10 to noon here, but I had a panic attack this morning, and that just like takes up a lot of the morning, you know? You
I'm
know.
sorry to hear that.
That's okay. I mean, it sucks, but it's cool. It's not that cool, but it's par for the course. But I'm just saying, like, the first chunk of my day has gone by kind of quickly. So
But we're here now.
we're here now, though, and I'm so excited. It is good afternoon, good evening to you, right, Alex?
Yeah, it's almost 7 p.m.
Crazy. It's crazy how you're in the future like that.
Yes, it's early for me. Normally I live on American time, so
So also 7 o'clock American time for me is late. So well, yeah, just hi to everybody in the chat. Happy Sunday, wherever you are, whatever time it is. Thanks to everybody who is watching on my channel, and thanks to everybody who's tuning in on Alex's channel. Make sure that whichever channel you are watching from, you go and subscribe to the opposite one. And I have a lovely mod named Alicia who will be putting up our channel names and a couple other things throughout the stream. And yeah, let's get into it, huh?
let's go. I'm ready.
Okay. So, Alex, you know that I have a podcast, and you're
I do know
very,
that you have a
yeah,
podcast.
you're aware of that. And you're very well aware that I'm very broad in my interests, right?
Yeah.
And let's see. Gosh, it was over a year ago now that I started the spinoff That's So Effed Up Presents. And every month I present a new kind of topic, and we dive into that over the course of a month. It's super fun, very random. Let's see, what did we do most recently? Fairy tale blankery, starts with an F. Trying to abide by the YouTube rules. Although I know we're 4 minutes in, but I'm just trying to be better.
Let's play it safe.
Just try to be better every day, Alex. I think that's like
Always.
all we can do, right? So it's speaking of being better every day. Yeah, so I started the spinoff, and then you and I started doing our thing. Ash and Alex do Scientology. And then uh, and then I started the YouTube channel, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna do a weekly segment where I cook, and I'm gonna do a weekly segment where I do a live podcast, and a weekly segment where I talk about mental health." And then, after doing that for, like, a few weeks, plus a bunch of other stuff, I was like, "Oh, Ashley, you've gone and pulled a classic Ashley and have done way too much, bitten off way more than you can chew." So now I'm having to, like, totally backtrack, and to all of my viewers who have been supporting my segments, thanks so much for watching. They're gonna become a little more irregular now because I realized that weekly was a little bit too much for me.
It's very easy for YouTube to consume all of your life. So I'm glad you're not backtracking, but taking a step back and focusing on what's important.
Yeah, I was so excited and I was having so much fun, and then also, like, I was noticing, just signs of, like, my mental health not being as good, and started realizing, okay, yes, exactly like Brian just said, like, I need to know my limitations, and, I've gotten better at that, but I still sometimes have to, like, fuck up and then make my way back, So I was like,
Yeah.
"Ugh, you tried to do too much, Ashley." And, it was cool, but I'm gonna do a couple more and then reel it back. Um, I'm blabbering as normal. I was just like, I was listening to a podcast that I recently guested on, and I was like, "You talk nonstop, Ashley, and, like, move from subject to subject without ever finishing a subject a lot." So let me go
I'm
back
there
to
for it.
that's
That's what I'm
so
here
what I
for.
was saying is, um, well, presents I've been doing for, yeah, just, over a year. Last month, we did fairy tales. The month before that, we looked into Christian fundamentalism. The month before that, I I don't know, we talked about
MLMs, was that a
I
presents
was
thing?
gonna say I was gonna say maybe
Yeah.
MLMs. They're pretty all over the place. It's really fun, and actually, this month, starting on Tuesday, the 12th, Tuesday, December 12th, the That's So Fucked Up presents season 90s nostalgia or nostalgic 90s. I don't remember the title. Is coming out. So that's super excited. We're starting out with Monica Lewinsky. Um, a big thing that I learned while doing this season is that women were treated really terribly in the 90s. I mean, it's not amazing now. It's getting better, but, like, woof, in the 90s, it's just
And
the media and
not just in the 90s, Ash. I mean, it's kind of been a thing historically that's been going on for a very long time.
yeah,
I think the 90s were bad, but it's definitely been worse and been bad for a long period of time. But yes, I know what you mean.
it
Women were definitely objectified, and there was a lot of pressure in society on looks and being skinny, size zero, and all of this. And it was global media being so huge with magazines. Like it was, yeah, not a nice time.
well, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be such a fun season," and we did Monica Lewinsky, and, she was, like, the first person to be cyberbullied, essentially, like, the first major victim of cyberbullying, and then we covered Tanya Harding, which was also I was like, "That'll be fun," and it was just kind of a bummer. Anyways, it was, I mean, not a lot that we talk about on the show is super fun, but usually it's I was like, "Oh, this will be light," and then I was just like, "Man, it's not as light as I thought." People
Mm.
were super mean, um, they still are, but
Yeah.
Monica Lewinsky and Tanya Harding got treated really, really meanly, and I don't think that Tanya Harding was perfect. I think that, they're Could she have done some things differently? Sure, but she was an abuse victim, fucking from day one. Her story is really sad. So, um, that's what's going on in December, and in January, here we come, Alex. Alex is my co-host, and I don't have a catchy name yet. Shoot, that's usually like the first thing I come up with is um the like a really cool title for the season.
Ash and Alex do human experiment. No, that's bad. Let's not call it that because we're not doing human experiments.
Ash and
We're just
Alex
talking
do unethical human experiments. They'll probably get attention.
Ash and Alex dissect human experiments.
Well, it has to be That's So Fucked Up presents something. So
Guys in the chat, come up with a name for it.
yeah, alliteration is my favorite. And what we're going to be talking about today, Alex and I, is a little bit about what is going to be coming up in that season because I'm super excited. And I can't wait to ask you if you've heard any of this stuff. And I thought that Alex was a perfect person to talk with this stuff about because I guess upon trying to find my 4 stories for the season, I realized that what I'm really interested in is psychological experiments. Um, so and a lot of it is well, the 2 stories that I was most interested in are very much stories of groupthink going very wrong. And just how easy it can be for people to conform to something that would be normally out of their morals and values. So it was interesting because Alex, you were like, "Oh, we should talk about." You say it.
We should talk about, that period of time in the 40s when a very
Or that
well-known
that Hale H guy,
that guy,
when he was doing his thing and he had his soldiers, right?
yeah.
Alex was like, "We should talk about them." And I was like, "Funny because that's kind of our first topic." So, have you heard, and we're not actually going to go deeply into it, you guys, because this is just a little taster. Actually, Alex and I are recording the full episode soon. So I'm also giving Alex a little tease. So, Alex, you better. I was going to say, you better act excited whether you are or not. But I was like, that sounds bad. It probably only, you know what? I was going to say, it probably only sounds bad to me because I have a dirty mind, but you know what? Somebody else in the chat would have said it. They would have said
Yeah.
it.
I'm excited. I'm ready. I'm ready for you to tease me and,
Oh my God. Okay.
tickle my fancy. I can't wait to get into it.
I'm going to tickle the shit out of your fancy. Let's go. Pip, cheerio, Alex.
Cheerio.
Let's go. Okay. So, you guys raise your hand. And that just means give any emoji in the comments if you've heard of the third wave, not the third wave of feminism, but the third wave, the high school experiment in the 60s that happened in Palo Alto, California that went very, very wrong. No, Alex?
I'm so uneducated on this whole topic, except for a couple of very specific things that I do know a lot about, but it's not something I delved into, which is why I'm excited to do it with you, Ash.
I'm so excited to tell you about it. Okay. So the third wave, I'm just going to give a little rundown. It was an experiment conducted by a history teacher in Palo Alto, California at the Cubberley High School, and his name was Ron Jones. And the third wave was an experiment that he created in 1967 with his I think they were a sophomore class, because I watched a documentary where they talk about some of the kids who were in the class, and they talk about how they heard older kids talking about how like this was going to revolutionize things, and how they were being kind of influenced a little bit too by the hearing the older kids talk about it, because it's really, really crazy. Basically, it started off as, he was planning on doing a one-day experiment, uh, and showing how easy it would be for, a dictatorship to happen, or a fascist government to come into power. And so on the first day, he gets his students to just start working on their posture. He's like, "Okay, you guys, like, let's we're going to work on our posture, because it'll help you breathe better, and athletes do this." And so it just starts as like working on their posture, and then he's doing activities with them where they're doing drills outside, and he and like they'll be kind of like disorganized, and then they have to run back into the room and like get back in their chairs and be sitting at posture. And his first he writes on the board, strength through discipline, and throughout the days it changes to strength through community, and strength through some other shit I'm not going to tell you. And basically, the next day he comes to school, and he had just planned on it being a one day kind of experiment, but the kids were all there, like, sitting upright at attention. And basically this turned into like almost a week and a half. It was 6 days, so I think it happened over like probably a 5-day school week, and then like went on into Monday. And the almost the entire school, it just was this kind of group think thing, where it was also, ar- around the time where, you know, Vietnam War was looming, and Black Panthers were around, and all of these groups were kind of forming. People were really scared, and as we know, in times of social unrest, it's really easy for people to kind of form up. So he kind of like just took, and the thing is it wasn't, unfortunately, a proper experiment, because there wasn't a control group. He didn't There was no actual study written about it or anything after that. He told the students that their grades would be dependent upon how much they participated. So if you were a super active party member, you would get an A. Passive party members would get a C. If you tried to revolt, but it was unsuccessful, you would fail. But if you had a successful revolt, you would get an A. So, and then he also said that very he said that he got very much into the experiment. He said, quote, "I thought it would be a one-day exercise. It turned out to be a one-week exercise in terror. My ego was inflated, and my sense of power and control was elevated, and I liked it. That's the problem."
That's the question I was going to ask. Is who's the guy doing this? Like, what's the theory behind it? Was he just was he trying to teach his students a lesson? Was he like
Yeah.
genuinely going in with good intentions, or was this guy some like egomaniac that just wanted to control these people from the offset?
No, so it seems that he was, a pretty liberal guy. He was a supporter of the Black Panthers right around this time as well. And this was in California that this was happening. The Jesus freak movement was also hitting the West Coast. People were just like, it, there was so
And
much social
1960s, right?
unrest.
So 1960s,
Yeah. Just
Scientology as well was booming.
people were like looking for something to grab onto. And so he becomes like this dictator. Everybody said they had known him as this really caring and charismatic teacher who suddenly just became really authoritative. He said, "Don't call me Ron, you call me Mr. Jones." And so
Sounds a little bit culty, Ash.
yeah. So that's actually going to be our first episode. Is I'm going to go deeply into that story. And it is wild. So to answer your question, he, students in the documentary said that he would have pretty controversial speakers come into class. And I was like, did he have a Black Panther or anybody come in? Because they said that he had well, they said he had a member of the white loving party of America,
Mm, mm.
You guys, I still don't know what I can say. They
I know.
said that he brought in a communist, a Klansman. So I'm like, I don't know, like what was he just trying to show all the sides, or then he started this schmachi experiment and like it's just I don't know. I don't
Mm.
know what were his intentions, because he did not go into it like super scientifically, like having a control group and stuff. He went about it unethically, telling the kids that their grades would depend upon how involved they were. Um so I just think that that's like definitely important to note. But he was also trying to kind of show that he was trying to show how easily the um er, you know mustache youth party was formed, basically just showing that you know, young people essentially and humans in general could be indoctrinated pretty quickly to go with the norm. And they want to be accepted, they fear being outcasted, they fear the repercussions, whatever. In this case also, these kids feared getting bad grades. They lived in a upper middle class place where going to college was expected and stuff at that time. So um also though, in Germany at the time that he's referring to, people were also in fear of not being accepted, being killed even. So I do think that even though it was really fucked up, it did end up kind of demonstrating a really valuable thing, in that we're not like better or worse than each other. That stuff can happen anywhere to anyone. It if it hadn't got squashed, it could have become a whole thing in California or whatever.
Yeah, and it's also taking advantage of people in a vulnerable state, right? As a child, you are vulnerable because you're still learning, you're growing, you're developing. And so, that's how a lot of these cults and coercive groups and all this sort of stuff, that's how they become so effective, because they prey on people who are going through a vulnerable moment in their life, whether that be, some traumatic experience or loss or whatever, grief at some point as an adult, or as a child, and that's one of the things that Scientology and cults are, it makes it so harmful and damaging, because if they get you while you're young, it's a lot your brain is a lot more malleable. It's a lot easier to shape your way of thinking to match and conform with the group mentality, which is much more damaging when you're younger, because as a teenager or as a child, you're still developing your neural pathways. So if you are in a group, a cult, a coercive group, or something like this, the long-term impacts of that is potentially worse than if you are an adult and you've already had your neural pathways kind of set and developed and that sort of thing.
Yeah, these kids were 14, 15,
Mm.
and then actually, ranging up even to 16, 17, 18, because it spread throughout the school. It was crazy. It was like a fucking mind virus. That's what I think is crazy is about groupthink, is people's desire to fit in and to belong, and how that can just lead to insanely dysfunctional decision making between it's like kind of this hive mind scenario. So I saw somebody in the chat mention the Stanford prison experiment, which of course you guys cannot go untalked about. Alex, have you ever heard of that?
You need to tell. So I know about the San Quentin prison situation, which we totally need to talk about on this podcast at some point. If you don't know, it's a guy called Leo, I think Stanley, who in America basically performed experiments on inmates, and this is of like a medical nature, right? So for example, he had this like voluntary sterilization situation where male inmates could volunteer to be sterilized. The idea being, if you're a criminal, you're bad, and if we stop you reproducing, then that will be better for humanity. And he was allowed to get away with it, and he was sponsored by the state. This is in America for years. And then he also did some really horrible medical things as punishment to inmates who had done bad things. So that's a thing that we need to talk about for sure. But the Stanford prison experiment itself, I don't know a great deal about. Enlighten me.
Okay. Somebody said Stanford, and it's Stanford. It happened at Stanford University. Hot tip, you guys, don't sign up for experiments at universities. It doesn't seem chill. It doesn't seem to go well. I think just don't do it. So also this one is also fucked up because the results are undeniably very interesting, and I think that regardless of his inserting himself too much, and I'm referring to Philip Zimbardo, who was the Stanford professor who ran this experiment, but again, by him just inserting himself into it way too much, it wasn't ran as an ethical experiment. And so it doesn't it does get referred to a lot, but also it gets a ton of flack for not being like a true experiment, because
You know what I don't understand is how did so many unethical human experiments, whether that be psychological, medical, whatever, how did so many of them how did they manage to get away with it in the United States for so long? A lot of these were sponsored by the government or, whatever. Some of them weren't. But, if you compare the US to the UK, for example, I'm not saying that they didn't happen here, but there seems to be a lot more in the history of the US than in the UK that were allowed to go on for quite a while before they then got shut down as unethical. And I just want to know why and how. that happened. You know, there was one case, I can't remember when it was, I think it was in the 60s or 70s or something, where the US government literally what was it, they spread like a bacteria, they put bacteria in like the air conditioning system for like the New York subway deliberately, so that a bunch of New York citizens would get this disease that wasn't going to kill them or whatever. It just, you know, the flu or something really simple like that. But they deliberately put it in the air vents, and just as an experiment to see how vulnerable, you know, people using the subway in New York were to a biochemical attack of some description. So they deliberately did this. People didn't know about it, and it was ultimately fine. No one got particularly harmed by it. But it's like, is that really ethical to just do an experiment on your own people like that without them even knowing, with the justification that, well, it allows us to see how vulnerable people are? Well, look, it's obvious to see how vulnerable the subway system is, because the problem isn't actually doing it. The problem is how easy it is to get something like that into the the airways of the anyway. I don't understand.
Well, the thing is, it's crazy. I mean, we're getting, yeah, Brian said MK Ultra, which I was
Yeah.
actually just looking into my episodes to see when I covered MK Ultra, because oh, okay, so I actually covered it in June of 2023, this year. So like 6 months ago. So I have an episode on MK Ultra, y'all, that is on the podcast. Um somebody else mentioned, yeah, they separated, this was some sort of, I think like a university study as well. They separated 3 triplets at birth to see if those triplets would suffer from anxiety, and then they found each other later in life and were like, what the fuck, and we're pretty traumatized about it.
It's terrible.
CO Bilf brought up a lot of unethical experiments in the US at places like Willowbrook. Yeah, so Willowbrook was a state mental institution, Alex, and they experimented, and like just crazy horrid abuses happened there. And oh my god, the military has a long track record of um experimenting on their own people. Like
Mm.
so there's one that I think I'm probably going to talk about as the last one. It was called the Edgewood experiments, where they had these men in the army volunteer for, they said something pretty non-nefarious. And at the time, the race was on to try to, mind control. I think it was probably during like the 50s. The 50s and well, 50s, 60s, man, shit was crazy. But so they ended up drugging the fuck out of these guys, and in cases making them hallucinate for days on end, and with a lot of dire consequences to a lot of these men. The United States has a vast history of
Mm.
doing terrible, terrible things to its own people. It's great. Oh my gosh. Alex, like there are so many that I could tell you about. When I was researching, I was just like, Jesus. But back to the Stanford prison experiment. It was a psychological experiment that happened in August of 1971. And it was supposed to be 2 weeks long, but it actually got cut short to a week because shit got so out of control. Basically, they divided they divided a group of like young men into 2 different groups, and one group of men were going to be prisoners, and one of them were going to be, and the other group was going to be prison guards. And it ended up, I'm not going to get into it, but basically people started taking their roles very seriously. The guards became quite abusive. The the prisoners became quite compliant. They could have technically, if they really wanted to, said, "Hey, let me the fuck out of here. This isn't cool." But it's so crazy how people will just believe that they're stuck somewhere. And I know that happens like in Scientology, where you're not technically like locked in that room, right? Like they're not gonna, well, I mean, I even heard somebody was saying that they just went to like an orientation, get taken from like room to room to room, and they said at one point they started feeling really freaked out, like they were like, I don't feel like we can leave.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
it's
like when I was on staff, for example, I went to, obviously there are situations where people literally physically can't leave. The Gold Base, International Base over in California, there's barbed wire and stuff, so people physically cannot leave. But for the average class 5 staff member who works at a Church of Scientology in a city like me, I lived at home, I traveled into work every day and traveled back at the end of the day. There was nothing physically stopping me from just walking out the door and never coming back again. I did do that once, and they came to my house and tried to convince me to go back, and then I did go back the next day. It's called a blow drill. But the physical limitations were much lower than people in the Sea Org at the international base, for example. But the mental barriers are very much there, and you feel like you can't leave, and you feel like you're part of this thing, and this is the way you have to do things. And the psychological game that is played is much harsher, I would say, than a non-coercive group or cult, right?
yeah, and no, shit just got really out of control with this one. And like I said, the study and Zimbardo have gotten a lot of flack for it not being a proper study, because in a proper scientific experiment, there should be control groups. The researcher should not be influencing the study and like a part of it. I
Was he like
actually,
involved? Was he running the show?
yeah, I'm not going to give too much away, but he was like fully in it with them.
Wow. Like the
Yeah,
human centipede.
I've never seen that because it
Oh my God,
looks
Ash.
way too
The human centipede's
disturbing.
wild, but this whole series is mad, because the first one is about a doctor who does this experiment right on these people, and we all know the whole concept of it. But the second film is even worse, because the second film is about someone who watches the first film and becomes obsessed with it, and then decides to do it himself based on watching the first. It was so wild. But the whole concept is, yeah, this doctor has this strange sick fantasy, and you know gets these people in and does this experiment on them just for his own personal curiosity. It's disgusting.
I think the term mad scientist
Yeah.
didn't just pop out of fucking thin air, you
Yeah.
know? I think science is really important, and I often believe in it. I'm like, well, that's fucking science. I don't like, end of discussion, you know? But I also think that there are way too many scientists who will go way past ethics, or uh it's like the scientists who test shit on animals. Like
I think
how
that's the question, isn't it? It's like, science is all about testing, experimenting, looking at theories and finding out and there's a lot of trial and error, and there's mathematics, and all of this is all really, really important and really valuable. But the question of ethics is also super, super important. And, there are a small number of scientists who, don't have that ethical boundary and those limits and so on. And it's a shame, because they're, the impact of their work can be very damaging. But I think ultimately, science experiments are important, and there's a way of doing things ethically to get the results that you need, even if it takes longer or you have to do certain things differently or whatever, you know.
Yeah. And before anybody is like, "Oh, well, do you use shit that's not tested on animals?" Yeah, to the best of my ability. Like, I'm not perfect, but I definitely look for that in when I'm buying. Luckily, I don't really buy a lot of cosmetics, but, like, my hair dye is always vegan, cruelty-free, like, non-animal tested. You can fucking figure out if the hair dye works without, putting it in a bunny's eye.
I think, yeah, that's the question of ethics, right? There are certain things that you have to, like, without testing on animals, the your life may be at risk. For example, anti-venom. If you get bitten by a snake or a spider or something, in order to develop the anti-venom, one of the most common ways of doing that is through using horses. So they would, if there's a snake, for example, they would
Mhm.
literally put a tiny amount of the venom into a horse, not enough to make them sick or whatever, but just over time to build up the antibodies. And then what they would do is then eventually extract some of the blood from the horse, and then they would separate the blood and find the proteins that are resistant to the venom and extract those proteins, and that is what the anti-venom is made of, that would save you or I's life if we were to be bitten by this snake. So really, really important. You cannot do that process without the use of animals, but there's a way of doing it that doesn't harm the animal. There's a way of doing it that is ethical, that's important and necessary. Testing makeup on an animal isn't life saving. So then there's the question of whether that's right to do, and is there a way of testing the product on something, or like, is there a way of testing to make sure that product isn't going to harm a human without using an animal? Yes, there are ways around that. So that's the question of ethics, right? Is when it's necessary and needed versus when it's just for the sake of it.
And I actually did find when I was just looking up, like, really messed up experiments, there were ones I found on animals too, and I was just like, "No, I don't. I wanna stick with the ones done to humans because, um, the the animal ones are just, like, too fucking sad, and I'm more interested in the psychological effects that, uh, that either go on during the experience or the experiment and, what it does after. The fucking kids, the 200 kids who, showed up at the rally at the end of the week to, take this thing national, as they thought, the shame that they felt for, like, years after, because they're like, "Holy shit, I was about to do." I'm not gonna go into it, but, you know, often these experiments are very harsh on people while they're happening, and then there's lasting psychological implications, but they're done in a really unethical manner. I
Mm,
found so many that were just like, "Are you kidding me?" Somebody mentioned that, you know, people of color, patients in mental facilities, orphans, um, military, a lot. Those are people that have been experimented a lot on
mm.
in the United States, Alex. You were, saying that it seems like America does it a lot. And we do. And that's why I'm always kind of like mind blown when I'm considered a conspiracy theorist for not trusting the government. I'm like, I'm sorry. Have you not looked at history at all or
Yeah.
um so if you want, and a few people have mentioned it in the chat, there's a 2015 movie called The Stanford Prison Experiment. Based on, it's definitely got quite a bit of Hollywood dramatization, but that's actually how I found out about the story, because that's actually kind of how I find out about a lot of things. Is I'll watch a movie or TV show or read a book or some shit and be like, did that happen? If it's really mind blowing, and then and when it
Just a rabbit hole.
did,
Yeah.
it's just like, whoa, here we go. The third one that I will touch on that we're going to be talking about in our season is the Milgram experiments done by Stanley Milgram. Ring any bells?
Tell me more.
Oh, I will. So this experiment was on obedience to authorities, and it was done at Yale University. So like I said, just don't don't don't
Don't
do
sign
it.
up.
Just don't sign up, you guys. If a university's like, "Hey, we're trying to figure some shit out," be like, "Yep, you do that on your own," and
Yeah.
walk away, you guys. So, uh this one, I would imagine, would have some lasting implications on the people who participated, because I would think that you would kind of feel terrible. So basically, there's a man in a white coat with a clipboard, and he says he's a doctor. And this means that he's a doctor, right? It's just like, I could throw on a fucking white coat and a clipboard and a pen. Oh, hello, Mr. Apostate. Is that APOS? Yeah, okay. I'm Dr. Richards. It's okay. So they have a guy in a white coat, and they're, oh no, I think he's a scientist. They're like, I'm a scientist or doctor. I don't know, whatever. And so there is an actor in the other room between like the glass partition, and they are told that the person in the other room is hooked up to like electroshocks, whatever. And you guys, when I do the episodes, they will be much more detailed and a little bit, a lot less, and whatever. I'm just not. I'll know my shit better. I wasn't
We'll do the deep dive. Yeah.
exactly. So they are told that the actor on the other side of the glass is a real person, and they're actually hooked up to real electricity, and they are told to give them increasingly um painful doses of electric shock. And seeing if I can find a quick stat. That's annoying, but I can't. But basically, it was found that a ton of the people were pretty not even hesitant to go up to like one of the most extreme levels. And a few people even went to the level that they told would be fatal for the person on the other
Wow.
side of the glass. And just because this, it's like I said, the study was on obedience to authority. So if this scientist says, "Oh, okay, like this person signed up for this experiment, and you're gonna be the one to administer the shock," it was just shocking to see how many
So we did that.
people just because somebody that they told was a figure of authority or, in academia told
Mm.
them to. Um, so I find it so interesting how people will just, if you asked any of those people before they walked into that room, like, "Oh, do you like hurting people? Would you ever kill anybody?" blah blah blah. I'm sure a lot of the answers
Mm.
would be no. But then so I just think, I mean, if you think about just the connection through all the studies that I just talked about, I guess they're all a little bit, I guess I suppose they're all sort of in the realm of looking at obedience to authority and groupthink and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, like the way the brain thinks, right? There are some fascinating social experiments that you can see on YouTube that are totally ethical, that are really interesting just to see how people's brains work. You know, for example, there's one, can't remember the name of it, but you know, everyone's in a room and there's one person or two people who are the, you know, testees, the people who are there, and everyone else is an actor. And you know, they're given a piece of information, so they're shown a picture, you know, and it's the color is blue, and then they ask, you know, what, raise your hand if the color you were shown was blue, and raise your hand if it was green, right? And all of the actors are told to raise their hand, you know, for the wrong color. And the people who are the actual testees, you know, most of the time will agree with the rest of the room, even though they know that it's wrong. And it's little things like that I find it's fascinating, because that group think, there's that doubt in your brain that you're like, oh, you know, I'm pretty sure it was blue, but everyone else is saying it's green, so maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe you know, I'll go with
It's
what they
probably
say.
me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's probably me. That I find that whole, the way, you know, the mind works, fascinating.
Have you seen the one where I think it was actually just like a prank show, but everybody in the elevator is facing the back of the elevator and the person gets on and is like,
Oh, it just turns around.
and so they turn around too. It's so
Yeah.
good. Yeah, but I think it really ties into, you know, controlling coercive groups and
Mhm.
cults and stuff too. It's just kind of how people will do things that they think they wouldn't do, that
Yeah.
would normally be out of their boundaries or ethics.
Mhm.
But when an authoritative figure tells them to do something or the whole group is doing something, people are pretty fucking quick to
Yeah.
fall in line. It's kind of been shown. I mean, the experiments have been replicated and, you know, they've had varying results, but it's been pretty shown throughout a lot of experiments done psychologically that people generally so much want and need to belong and feel the need to conform because it's so uh ingrained in us to go with the group, because if you go back to caveman times, being having the group out you, or what's it called when they kick you out?
Like ostracized or
Yes, when they
excommunicated.
ostracize you,
Yeah.
excommunicate you, back in the day, that meant death, like, you
Mm.
couldn't survive on your own. So it's actually very instinctual as humans that we feel very strong desire to, and it's hard to not conform, right? I mean, you've been emo for years now, like, it's not just a phase, mom, you
It's not a
know, like
phase.
wearing all black and getting up in the morning and just like being bummed, like it takes work, okay? You know? No, I didn't tell you I like some emo now. Um yeah, but you know, everybody wants to belong, and then even the people who, you know, want to go against the grain and they side swoop their hair and, you know, um even they belong to a group, you know? I
Yeah.
think even
It's identity, isn't it? You want to find A, an identity, a B, a sense of worth, and a sense of belonging. You know, everyone's looking for that in some way, shape, or
And
form.
a sense of order, because the
Yeah.
world feels so crazy, because it fucking is.
And it's easier to be a part of a group where the decision is made for you, whatever that is, whether it's, you know, a group of friends going to the gym, or, you know, a lunch club or whatever. Like, you know, it makes it easier if you're part of a group and then you collectively decide, okay, you know, on Wednesdays, we're going to wear pink. Okay, great. Well, now I don't need to worry about what I'm going to wear on Wednesdays because the decision's already been made. So it makes life easier. It's lazy, but it's easier. And that's so much a part of the way humans think.
I actually found that so interesting when I was watching the documentary this morning about the third wave. Is it said people's some of their main drivers was their desire to conform and belong, and also you're in high school, so you really, really want to conform and belong, but
Yeah.
also just and this kind of blew my mind, but the desire to have authority. Like, people ultimately seem to kind of like want to be told what to do.
Yeah. Because it's easier. You know, it's easier to have a decision made for you than to make your decision yourself. You know, and we're talking here in broad generalities. We're not saying everybody on every topic, on every decision, but as a general rule of thumb, the human species likes to conform to a group and, you know, to follow the norm. The funny thing is, it's up to us to what the norm is. You know, society determines what's right and what's wrong, what's moral, what's immoral, ethical, unethical. We as a group decide that, but then we're setting our own rules that we're then following, because again, it's easy. You know,
Yeah.
fascinating. I can't wait for this series, Ash. It's going to be
It's
really
gonna be
exciting.
so fun. See,
Yeah,
as someone who, dealt with, like, childhood neglect and abandonment, um, and had to, like, learn how to do everything kind of by myself, I wanna fucking throat punch people when they try to tell me what to do. I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry, who the fuck are you?" Like, I get, like, crazy defensive.
yeah,
Um, so so that part of it, it's like the conforming and belonging, like, I get that. Who wants to be lonely? Like, I might be like, "I hate people, I love being by myself," but then, like, I cry at night sometimes, you know? So it's like, "Really?" You always look all sad when I make jokes because you know there's some seriousness to them. I'm like, "No, I'm being funny, Alex." You're like, "I know you do cry at night sometimes though, Ashley." I'm like,
but
"Yeah."
we all do, you
We
know,
all
and that's the
do.
thing. Being vulnerable and being open and honest is important. You know, it's
Yeah.
funny to joke about these things, but also let's not gloss over the fact that that is a very real reality for a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny to joke about it, but also it's serious.
My therapist might say that, it's a defense mechanism of
Yeah.
mine just to make jokes. Weird with my podcast and all. Um, well, yeah, you guys, we are going to head out because we actually are going to go
Record an episode.
record
Yeah,
that episode about the third wave. So sorry, guys, you have to wait, but Alex gets to hear about it right now.
I
Um,
can't wait.
real quick, we got a few things. Pup Gruber said, real quick question. Did you fear going live, and how did you get over that fear? I think we could both answer that, Alex.
Wait, are these start? Do you want to bring them up on the screen so
Oh,
we can see them?
sure,
Yes.
that's a great idea.
Did you fear going live, and how do you get over that fear? Me, no. Generally not. I don't have that, unfortunately, because I've always been quite good at public speaking, and you know, I'm quite lucky in that sense. But I do know that a lot of people do get a bit nervous, and you know, it's totally natural and totally normal to do that.
I think I used to get pretty nervous when we did our lives.
Yeah, but you once the more you did it, the more you became comfortable with it, and you know, I
Yeah.
think that's the thing. Once you're used to it.
I
It's
used to be
easier.
really self-conscious about my facial expressions, and then I just decided to get over that, and now it's cool.
And now we joke about it. I love it.
Yeah. Selena says, "This is why we get sent to school during our most impressionable years, so we learn how to be good citizens and worker bees."
Absolutely. Well
Yes.
said.
Mhm. Yeah, Brian brought up the Tuskegee Institute experiments, which I've read a lot about. They told black men they either infected. I did read that part's not true, so I'm not actually sure if they purposely infected black men with syphilis or they just told black men with syphilis that they were treating them, but they weren't. Um, that was a fucking insane one. And yeah, there's quite a few. The Psychopath Test by John Ronson covers all of these contemporary. That was from shit. Uh,
RoboTube.
okay, you got it.
There we go.
Contemporaneously, the experiments discussed in John Ronson's The Men Who Stare at Goats were also being conducted different times. Yeah. So, did you ever see that movie,
No,
Alex?
I need to though. It's on my list.
Oh, yeah. Well, you were probably in Scientology when it came out.
Probably.
um, no, but it's. I thought it was fiction, but they were when they were trying to do mind control. Everything and anything was on the table.
Wow.
Yeah, somebody else mentioned that. Sophia says it's a doctor's research project. You should trust it. Sorry, ever heard of Mangala? I will ask questions. You've probably heard of Joseph Mangala, right?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's a total topic for a whole episode.
Oh yeah. I actually did an episode on him. I think it
Wow.
was episode 13. That is so long ago. It's crazy. It's like when even was that? Natalie said, I think in some ways the findings of Milgram's shock experiments explain people in cults enforcing horrible things in cults.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And there's that the line is always blurred, isn't it, between being a victim and being, you know, an abuser yourself. I recruited a lot of people into Scientology. That was my job, selling books, right? I am responsible for people who are currently in Scientology to this very day because I recruited them. I sold them a book. But ultimately, at the time, I thought that was the right thing to do. I thought I was helping them. So there's an element of me being a victim, but also me being the one responsible for other people's suffering. And that's part of the recovery process, is like, coming to terms with that and figuring out how you feel about it, and addressing guilt and shame and all this other stuff. But that line is very blurred, and there's a very big difference between someone who recruited someone into a cult and someone who actively locks people in rooms and all this sort of stuff. That's, yes, those people who are doing that are victims, but for me, I have slightly less sympathy for those people because they are generally nasty, horrible people doing those things. And that's the line, isn't it, between where your victimhood is outweighed by your nastiness or narcissism or, unethical behavior as a horrible human being. So fascinating topic.
I think that's obviously what you're describing. Something that a lot of people struggle with when they come out of coercive groups is
Mhm.
moral injury, where not only have you been traumatized and had these terrible things happen to you, but you've also done things to other people that you feel guilt and shame for. So not only are you wrestling with like the anger and resentment and loneliness and all of the things that come with leaving a group, Alex, you could explain more in depth. But then you're also dealing with the fact that, like you said, you sold people the book. Like there are
Yeah.
some people today who are still in there because you approached them and said, hey, this is going to change your life in a super great way.
Absolutely.
So I'm really excited to, stay cult adjacent, but do something a little different right now with the group think stuff. I think it's gonna be
Yeah.
really fun. So you guys make sure that you subscribe to the podcast. That's where the series will primarily live. That's So Fucked Up, anywhere you find your podcasts. And make sure to subscribe to my channel. If you're over on Alex's channel, it's at TSFU the podcast live. You can find all the socials at TSFU the podcast. And can we get Alex's banner up?
I have a banner. Oh my god, how exciting.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, look, guys, anyone watching on my channel, please go and, give Ash some YouTube SPTV love, subscribe, like, comment, share, all that sort of stuff. I love doing episodes with Ash and can't wait to be doing more now that we're stepping aside, like you say, cult adjacent. I'm trying to do more of that with my channel anyway. So yeah, excited.
Yeah. It's awesome. I love to dive into the psychology of why people are doing what they're doing, how they're ending up where they are, and excited to do more of that with you guys. So, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure to hit the like button. Pew pew. Look, I'm a YouTuber now. Subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and have a great Sunday, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Do 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 do